The 1970s were a great time for television, and there were many classic series that premiered in that decade. But for every show from then that has gone on to stand the test of time, there are others the public has largely forgotten about, and for good reason. Join Facts First as we take a look at the worst sitcoms of the 70s. Supertrain. Supertrain premiered on NBC in 1978 and lasted a few months before being pulled off the air in '79. At the time of the show's premiere, it was the most expensive series that had ever been produced for television. The show's gimmick premise made it incredibly expensive to produce. The entire series was set on its titular train, which was a bullet train powered by nuclear energy. With all the money NBC had sunk into it, they had incredibly high hopes. They put nearly as much money into advertising as they did into production, hoping audiences would tune in to watch the futuristic series. Sadly, the performance of the series' debut was abysmal, and things only got worse from there. When it became apparent the series wasn't going to go up in the ratings anytime soon, NBC attempted to overhaul it with a new cast. Despite that, the show ended up being pulled after only 3 months. NBC apparently lost many millions of dollars in the ordeal and nearly had to file for bankruptcy. Today, most audiences have likely never heard of Supertrain. Though it was the most expensive show of its time, its effects are lacking compared to today's premium streaming series. The Ropers. In 1979, ABC premiered a spin-off of its then-recent hit Three's Company titled The Ropers. The show was centered on the landlords from the prior series. The characters of Stanley and Helen Roper were written off of Three's Company so they could be given their own series. Sadly, The Ropers wasn't a success. Though it ran for 2 seasons, few people tuned in, and it ended up being canceled. Me and the Chimp. Although it worked for Clint Eastwood and Ronald Reagan, many Hollywood stars have had a very hard time looking presentable when trying to act next to a monkey. The 1972 series Me and the Chimp suffered as a result of this rule, having since gone down as one of the most ridiculous and poorly conceived shows of the decade. Me and the Chimp revolved around the premise of a dentist and his family living with a chimpanzee that failed the space program. In the years since its ill-fated debut, it's become more notable as a joke than as a TV program. It only lasted 1 season before being canceled. Holmes and Yoyo. Holmes and Yoyo was an incredibly odd comedy series that ran on ABC for 1 season in 1976. The premise revolved around a detective that was given an android partner, and the pair proved to be an odd couple. The show was maligned upon its premiere and didn't perform very well in the ratings. It's also become known more for being a punchline than its actual content. All That Glitters. In 1977, a show called All That Glitters premiered that was way ahead of its time in many ways. It was a parody of daytime soap operas, making it one of the first comedy series to have storylines that carried on from week to week. Even though the show had a fairly novel premise, it wasn't a big hit with critics or audiences. No one seemed to care for the series' sense of humor at the time, and it was pulled after only 3 months. Not long after it was removed from the air, the series Soap premiered. Soap debuted later that year and featured a strikingly similar premise, but Soap proved a much bigger hit with critics and audiences alike, who simply found it funnier. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already, and stick around for more of the worst of the 70s shows. The Andros Targets. The Andros Targets was an unsuccessful thriller series that premiered in 1977 to little acclaim. The series only ran from January to July that year before the network pulled the plug. It aired on CBS and failed to strike a chord with audiences. The Flying Nun. Even though The Flying Nun may have been a success with audiences at the time, it certainly hasn't aged very well. Besides the fact that it seems especially dated, its star has also shared that she had a miserable time working on the program. That was, of course, future movie star Sally Field, who had just come off the success of her previous series, Gidget. According to Sally, there was nothing she would rather have been doing less at the time than filming The Flying Nun. She had quite a bit of fun filming the series Gidget, but found herself miserable on the set of The Flying Nun. She had taken her role on that series as a result of not wanting to stay out of work for too long after the end of Gidget. Thankfully, Sally went on to leave The Flying Nun behind and achieve stardom on the big screen. The Flying Nun ran for 3 seasons before ending in 1970. 82 episodes were produced. Today the show stands as an oddity, though most modern audiences likely won't make it past more than a couple of episodes. Hello, Larry. During the run of the hit 70s series MASH, supporting star McLean Stevenson made the choice to leave the show because he didn't want to play second fiddle to star Alan Alda. Many balked at the star's decision, and even he doubted that he would be able to find another show to star on as high in quality as MASH was. He went on to star in a variety of series, none of which were big successes. His biggest failure was arguably Hello, Larry, which premiered in 1979. The show featured Larry as a talk show host, relocating from LA to Portland, Oregon. Mr. T and Tina. Before Mr. T rose to prominence throughout the 80s and the A-Team, there was another, far less popular Mr. T. This was the titular Mr. T of Mr. T and Tina, which was an unsuccessful spin-off of the series Welcome Back, Kotter. The spin-off revolved around the character of Taro Takahashi, also known as Mr. T. The Japanese character appeared on Welcome Back, Kotter for an episode, and the producers liked him so much they decided to give him his own show. But audiences didn't feel the same enthusiasm. The other character on the series was Tina, who was a nanny played by actress Susan Blanchard. The Brady Bunch Hour. After the Brady Bunch ended, the ABC network tried to capitalize on the success of the show by giving the cast its own variety show. The result was the Brady Bunch Hour, which featured the cast of the Brady Bunch performing a series of musical skits. The cast apparently hated their time on the show, except for Robert Reed. Apparently, although Reed hadn't much enjoyed his time on the Brady Bunch, he enjoyed the singing and dancing aspects of the Brady Bunch Hour. The show only lasted a year and has since become viewed as a joke in the canon of the Brady Bunch. Co-ed fever. After the success of National Lampoon's Animal House towards the end of the 1970s, there were other pieces of media that attempted to recreate that film's unique college atmosphere. One such was Co-ed Fever, which performed so abysmally it was canceled after only 1 episode. It's gone down in infamy for its lack of success, though that's likely the only interesting thing about it. Hee Haw Honeys. Most people have likely heard of Hee Haw, but fewer will be familiar with Hee Haw Honeys. The series premiered in the late 70s as a gender-swapped version of the original Hee Haw. It featured Kathy Lee Gifford and Misty Rowe, as well as a number of musical guests that stopped by over the course of its 1-year run, before its lack of success in the ratings eventually saw it come to an early end. Some notable musical guests featured on the series include Conway Twitty and Loretta Lynn. Now it's time to hear from you. Are you familiar with any of these shows? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.